My name is Douglas Guanlao. Like my dad was already an illustrator, so I was always surrounded by like artwork, and he was a comic book illustrator in the Philippines, so he always had tons of references. Mad Magazine and Cracked and Fangoria and comic books. So pretty much those are kind of like the things that babysat me, TV and magazines. I think just because seeing my dad do it and then all his friends being artists also, I think in general, I think I thought I wanted to be an illustrator. But then, I don't know, it was the weirdest thing. Like, my dad had taken us to Comic-Con. All of a sudden, you know, they had a tutorial prep or portfolio reviews. I decided, I was like, oh, maybe I'll, you know, try giving comic book a shot. You know, next thing I knew, you know, you have mentors and you have other people that, you know, they have a lot of kind of like similar interests and other interests, and that got me, you know, thinking about what other, you know, things I can do in art. I did 15 years at Treyarch Activision, and it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I decided like I wanted to try something else different. I kind of pushed it, you know, like the back of my mind. It's kind of like, oh, just concentrate on this. You know, you have a good paying job. This is what you're gonna be doing now. But I knew there was something like itching. You know, like a lot of my friends are just kind of like always questioning. They're like, you know, you used to draw and doodle and never really painted. I was very much just kind of like a black and white illustrator. And then a buddy of mine who I used to work with, his name was Greg, Crayola, he's probably a really well-known artist now. He took me to a Todd Shore show, and I was just like, oh my God, like the most unbelievable stuff. But I just remember seeing his paintings, and I was like, this, you know, like I want to do this, you know, at one point. I think on the top, it would have to be my father. That'd be number one right there. Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes. When I had first moved here in the States, it was one of the first strips that I kind of just gravitated towards. And it was just this kid imagining all these things. And, you know, I've always kind of gravitated toward the illustrative part of you know, of a lot of artists, and I think a lot of cartoonists, you know, stuff that I saw on Mad Magazine, then kind of just like all of a sudden it was like Frazetta, and then comic books it was like Jim Lee and these guys, and then I think my dad gave me kind of like how to draw the Marvel way, and it was like John Buscema, and he was like, and all of a sudden I was just kind of like copying stuff from there. And then later on, it wasn't until I went to art school that I really started appreciating, you know, kind of like the masters. You know, and for me, it was just like Rembrandt. It was like, for me, like that artist kind of, just that look, just the person that he was painting, and then him. You know, it always kind of like that connection with the audience. And I think that's kind of like what I've, you know, started incorporating into a lot of my work. I started seeing that it was just like that connection, that being or that character on the other side. I think the last piece I did here, you know, you don't really know kind of like what it is that you're painting or creating yet until you start working on it. And you know, like they ask you, it's like, what is this? What does this piece mean? And I think by doing the sketches and doing the work and actually doing the painting, you know, I start connecting like the last piece. I think part of it was just like my influence of cartoons. At the same time, I was pretty religious in the first half of my life, and so I started investigating like the creation myth. Like where do we come from? Where do things come from? Where do ideas come from? And so, you know, again, when I used to doodle or draw, I used to be like cartoons. It's like, where do these ideas come from? And so finally I was like, you know what? It's a mishmash of all these little things, of all these influences. And you know, for me, I want the audiences to kind of like start I want them to see that. Obviously, it's very difficult, because audiences may have different interpretations of your work. But for me, it was just like I finally, I'm still exploring, but I'm starting to identify like, this is what I like. This is what I like doing. These were my influences, and again, it's like me trying to understand where ideas come from, or why these objects or these characters still kind of linger in my brain. I started accepting like, hey, I love this stuff. Like, why not, create and paint stuff that you loved, as a child. I think finally putting my work up for ArtShare and kind of like having ArtShare do the Summer Salon was such a great experience. I've told my friends that it allows artists to openly kind of like bring your work in and have people see your stuff. I think the hardest thing for a lot of artists is, to have a big mass of people just look at your stuff. Even if you can get like that small percent to kind of like identify and see your work, it allows you to go like, hey, there is an audience out there. And I think ArtShare, and their Summer Salon allows artists to do that, and who are afraid to just like, bring their work out. And for me, it was just like, if, my wife wasn't on Instagram and gone and said, hey, ArtShare, like my wife is my biggest kind of like supporter. If it wasn't for her and, pointing out that there are, galleries out there, and especially ArtShare that allows artists to bring their work and, just to be open about presenting their stuff, it's a great thing. So thank you, ArtShare, for, just giving that opportunity, to me and other artists.